Well, hello and welcome to our Friday Digest series, the last of our legislative priority webinars. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kristen Harbison. I'm the political director for Maryland LCD. And as always here, your presence speaks to the power of our community and to your commitment to the environmental causes that affect us all. Our goal with these Friday Digests is to provide you with the information, the tools, and the resources to be an informed and active advocate. We also want the agenda for these virtual meetings to be driven by what you're interested in. So please let us know what you want to hear about. The easiest way to provide this information is to fill out the survey you'll receive at the end of the session. And as you're joining, please type your name into the chat and tell us where you're joining from. As we move through the half hour that we have to get today, please type your questions and comments in the question and answer or in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of them as we can to help shape us today's conversation. As I mentioned, this is our fourth Friday Digest in a series discussing our four major priority bills in front of the Maryland General Assembly this session. Today, we're focusing on the coal dust cleanup and asthma mitigation fund. This bill builds on Maryland's successful model of charging fees on fossil fuel transport to address community impacts. Just as we currently charge a fee on oil transport to help address spills and protect communities, this legislation would establish a fee on coal transport to address the impacts on public health and our climate. Communities along the coal transport routes face significant health challenges, particularly higher at rates of asthma and respiratory issues. So this bill would generate upwards of $300 million annually for climate programs, with 40% directed to support overburdened communities affected by coal transport, as well, including about $5 million annually for asthma treatment programs. We had been hoped that we might be able to be joined by this House sponsor for this bill, Delegate Dana Stein, but unfortunately, he has the business in the General Assembly with voting lists and bill hearings, so he sends his best, and we'll look forward to trying to find another time to have him talk to you all. But in the meantime, I couldn't be happier to get to welcome our Executive Director, Kim Coble, to chat with us about this bill and it's important for Maryland's communities and climate goals. Kim, you've been working on this bill for a couple years and were instrumental from the very beginning in crafting it. So can you talk a little bit about the background of this bill and where it came from?
Yes, thank you, Kristen. And it's fun to be here on this side of the webinar. So this idea actually came through the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, which I co-chair. And I also want to give a shout out to Beth Harbor, who's on the call as well, and is a member of the commission. And back in 2023, we were looking to generate revenue for climate programs and had many different ideas going forward and really pursuing different things. And at that time, we were interested in the model of a program that Maryland has in place regarding the transport of oil. So there's a fee on oil transportation that then is used for oil spill cleanup and oil enforcement programs. And we thought there could be a nice model there that we could use for coal transport. So we looked at that, and we actually looked at putting a fee on the transport of coal and the transport of natural gas, which is the bill that Delegate Stein introduced last year. Since that time, we found out that putting a fee on the transport of natural gas was not allowed based on federal law. So we then narrowed it to the transport of coal through Maryland. And Delegate Stein is also on the commission and was instrumental in getting us that recommendation into the final Maryland Commission on Climate Change list of recommendations. So it's highly supported by the commission, and this will be the second year of putting it forward.
Great, thanks. And can you walk a little bit through, I gave a brief overview of the bill, but can you walk through a little bit, anything else about sort of the key elements of the bill and why it's important that we pass this bill now for Maryland's future?
Yes. The way the bill would be structured is to put a fee of $13 per ton of coal that is transported through Maryland. And the coal, a lot of coal comes from West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and through our rail lines to the port. And there's a lot of coal. I think we're the second largest coal exporter in the country. So a lot of coal transports through here. And so it'd be $13 per ton. It's estimated to generate about $300 million a year. And so once the bill sets that fee up, calls on MDE to develop the regulations to implement the fee, and then designates that the fee would be used on kind of in three ways. One is to pay for climate programs and climate actions in Maryland. We definitely need more resources to address the increasing greenhouse gas emissions that are coming out of Maryland. The second part that's really important is that the bill specifies a Justice 40 approach to those investments. So that means that 40% of the $300 million would be targeted for underserved and overburdened communities in Maryland, communities that really bear the uh, disproportionate amount of the burden from pollution. The third part is a great idea that Delegate Stein put into the bill, and that is to allocate $5 million a year for asthma treatment for people that live along the rail lines. And just as an aside, Maryland has the highest asthma rates in the country. 13.7% of adults in Baltimore City and 20% of children have asthma. The national and statewide average is 9%. So there's a huge increase in the number of people that suffer from asthma in Baltimore City. And so that allocation of the $5 million per year for that treatment is really important.
So this is a public health bill, this is a climate bill, and it's a revenue generation bill.
Exactly. It does, yeah, it's many things to many people. We, as you know, Kristen and I have been in meeting with the budget chairs and the revenue uh, legislators that work on revenue, and they're very interested in a fee that people outside and businesses outside of Maryland would pay that would generate $300 million. We've been talking with the Environment Committee members, and they're very interested in having revenue that could go to climate change and programs and actions that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we've talked to legislators in the health arena and elsewhere that really are interested in addressing the asthma problems. So it's a wide reaching, the benefits of this bill are wide reaching.
So there's one of the questions that's come through the chat already is sort of do we know how much what the value is of the coal that will have the $13 fee? If the company wanted to ship elsewhere, do we know what that cost would be?
Great question. And we knew this was going to be a really important question. And one of the pushback items that we've been getting is, well, what's going to be the impact to the port? So Maryland LCV, with thanks to some external funders, contracted an independent study with the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Studies, an environmental economist, to look at that exact question, independent of any politics or anything else. And we are expecting the results from that study early next week. The preliminary results indicate that the two places that a coal line would go would be Norfolk and also down into the Gulf of Mexico areas, the ports down there. And preliminary results indicate that it just does not make economic sense, even with the additional fee, to go to those ports. We'll have exact numbers on that when we get the report next week.
Yeah, so we're all waiting we're waiting with bated breath for that report to come back. Just Kim and I work very closely on this bill together. And I will say just it is a bill that I personally love working on because it hits on so many things that people really care about, the health concerns, the economic concerns. And you talked a little bit about sort of how it plays into the very widely publicized budget questions
Mm,
this year, but it goes back also to the revenue generation is specific to climate funds, which goes back to previous work and the requirement for almost $1 billion a year for the climate plan to implement the climate plan. Do you want to just can we just
yeah.
remind people about sort of where that came from and what those how this fits into the other work that we've been doing?
Yeah, thank you for that. Uh, some of you probably remember in 2022 when we helped pass the Climate Solutions Now Act, and it set up the most ambitious climate reduction or greenhouse gas reduction goals in the country, set Maryland on a path to really start addressing in a very comprehensive way the need to reduce these emissions. So that passed in 2022. One of the provisions in that bill was for the state to write a plan on how to achieve those goals. So in December of 2023, the Moore administration produced the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan. And that plan specified the exact actions and programs that need to be put in place to meet the 60% reduction by 2031 and the net zero by 2045. One of the big things that that plan said is that we need an investment in our climate programs of roughly $1 billion a year moving forward. So that caused a lot of people to really stop in their tracks. But fortunately, Delegate Stein and the commission really sat down and said, all right, well, how do we start generating this money? And this bill, as I said, would generate about a third of what is needed. So it's a great jump start into that to helping the state meet its commitments that it set out in both the Climate Solutions Now Act and the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan.
There are a couple questions that have been coming through the chat about wondering about if this is actually sort of perversely creating incentives for us to keep producing coal and keep exporting coal out of the state. Do you have any any comments on how to answer that concern?
Oh, it's a great question. And, there's a lot of, take the oil transport fee. And, the state generates revenue from all different kinds of sources. Some of them are fee based and some of them are more widespread. I personally prescribe that a polluter based fee system is actually a good way to go. So we have this coal transporting the companies that are transporting it and bringing it across the state need to pay the state of Maryland to reduce the impacts of the fossil fuel production of coal as well as the public health impacts from that transport. So I don't believe it is a way of the feedback loop is a positive one because it helps support the state programs. I should mention real quickly that the rail lines and the coal companies do not cover the rail cars that carry coal. The big mounds of coal in these rail cars come across, and if the wind's blowing and if there's rain that comes and percolates through the coal, all of that ends up in our environment. It ends up on the roadways, in the airways, on the cars, on the homes of people that live near these rail lines. So the pollution that comes off of it is real and does need to be addressed. And this is a way of holding them accountable for that.
And that gets actually to one of the questions in the chat. Are there ways to ship coal that limit the pollution and asthma? And would this help to incentivize that?
Yeah, hopefully it would. There's one thing that the companies could do is to simply cover the rail cars. They say that that's a very costly practice, both in materials and in labor, and they don't want to do it, which is again all right, but then you need to pay for the impact of not doing it. And there's barges that go down the Mississippi that carry coal. And but I think the rail line is the primary way of transporting it that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and so when we talk about, so I think one of the things that I am most excited about this, in addition to supporting the broader state climate goals, is the way that it will help to directly benefit the communities that are most impacted by this coal pollution. Um, all along the railroad, people think of it as the export terminal in Baltimore and other cities in Baltimore. And as a Baltimore resident, I know that that is true, but I also know that it's not just, there are other, it's all the communities along the rail line, including the communities in Western Maryland where when the trains are coming through. How how will this funding be distributed to the affected communities? Is there within existing programs? Does it go directly to the communities? Does it go through the department?
Right. That system will be set up once the bill passes. The bill calls on MDE to set up the system. But I know that the intent of this fund and this the way we are hoping it's distributed is that communities along these rail lines that are suffering from asthma, whether they're in Western Maryland or whether they're in downtown Baltimore, are able and willing to access the $5 million. So there's no geographical limitation on how those dollars would be spent.
Great. And yeah, there's some other comments. We're having, it's great to see so much engagement in the chat. I'm trying to keep up with it all. And there's response about, that containment is practical and inexpensive when all the costs are considered, including when you include the externalized health costs borne by the communities, which I think is a really important point. That one of the things that we're trying to do with this, and Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, part of that is actually making sure that that the companies are bearing some of the costs that are borne by the communities and helping the communities to bear those costs. So this is a way of making them cognizant of the costs, some portion of the cost to the community in terms of their health, the health risks.
Exactly. I think you've summed it up very well right there. Yep.
And there's some additional comments saying, is there a way of incentivizing covering the coal, like charging, like having a less of a fee for companies that do?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but we can definitely talk to Dana Stein about that. If anybody who's asking the question has any good information on that, please forward it to us. This bill really, it is focused on generating revenue from the transport of coal. Okay, so and addressing the public health impacts, especially for underserved, overburdened communities. The, I'm looking at the chat as well, and I think everybody is spot on to say, well, what about the use of coal and the transport of coal and the burning of coal, and don't we want to stop that? And the answer is yes, we do. But this bill is focused on the generation of generating a revenue source. So it's kind of the way it works in the legislature. The more focused a bill is, the easier it is to move it. Um, but it's not to say that there aren't really important issues that are raised in the process as well.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we're having these Friday digests, when you're talking to in it, especially in advance, this one where we're talking about in advance of a hearing, is to get people engaged so we can raise some of these questions and encourage people to contact their legislators and tell them about their concerns in with regards to coal transport. So please, as Kim said, please reach out to us if you have ideas, if you have ideas or comments. We are very, very interested in hearing it. The bill hearing in the Senate is coming up on February 27th, and then in the House on March 6th. So we've got a little bit of time, but not that much time. But um, what is what are the ways that people can be getting engaged at this point?
Yeah. Well, since that is pretty much your job, let me It's a
You're going to
great
send them
question,
right
though.
back to me, aren't you?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and let people know the best way to get engaged, how, where, when, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so thanks, Kim, for that question. So the bill hearing in the Senate is on February 27th. So that's coming up in just a couple weeks. It's being sponsored by Senator Jim Rosapap, and it will be heard in the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee. I think written testimony is it would be great to get written testimony in support of this bill from community members who are engaged in it. We tend to be seeing a lot of these bill hearings tend to be are getting very long, and so we're trying to, I think, um, get as many voices as we can being heard in as many ways possible, but not necessarily adding to a very long bill hearing with having a lot of people sign up or for oral testimony, but sending written testimony, sending letters to emails to your legislative offices, whether or not they're on the committee, and saying, this is a bill I heard about and this matters to me. Um, you I do. So as a political director, I'm the professional lobbyist. So I'm walking around the halls and talking to these legislators all the time and saying, hey, let me tell you about this coal bill. And they're very polite and they do listen to me and we're able to talk through some of the details. But the people that they really want to hear about is you. You are the voices that they actually care about, because I have I have my own senator and delegates for whom I'm the constituent, but for them, even for them, I'm mostly a lobbyist, not a constituent. So they need to hear from you. This is one of the reasons that we're trying to do these Friday digests to get you informed so you can reach out to your legislators and tell them what's important to you. Also, I'd say if you want to send information, if you do have other ideas about this bill or comments, or concerns about it, please also email it to us so we can make sure that we're taking it into account as we're approaching this bill. We're almost halfway through the General Assembly. It's I know Monday will be day 41. So whatever, counting back from there, I guess that makes today day 38 of a 90-day session. So there's still a lot of time to go and a lot of places to engage. Going back to there's been a lot of information chatting in the chat about how to submit uh, testimony. So keep an eye on their website for instructions on that. Our friend Marie Laporte says if you submit written testimony, be sure to hit save on that. But we were working on making sure that we have a instruction on how to submit written testimony for our members. So watch this space for more of that. Are there other questions that we haven't gotten to?
One thing I
Yes.
thought, Kristen, if you can also touch on it, the feedback we're getting from legislators. I mean, do you
Oh,
feel
yeah,
optimistic about the bill?
I do. This, I feel like being able to talk about this bill in a way that uh, especially in the context of this very difficult budget year where everybody's looking for ways to save money. This is a bill that says, here's more money. Here's upwards of $300 million that's not paid for by Marylanders. That's really attractive to people, and they're very interested in it. And I think also a lot of people when we talk about this being a way to help to support asthma treatment, many people are affected by asthma, and they understand the burden that is. They understand how this will be helpful to constituents, even if they're not along the coal route, that this will be really important. So we've had really good reception talking to legislators. We'll look forward to the bill hearing. Of course, this is a long process. These 90 days are very long, but yeah, no, I'm optimistic that this is being received very well by legislators, including some pretty, the leadership in the budget committees who love it when we tell them about here's a way to bring in some more money to the state.
You know,
Um,
one of the questions that I'm seeing here is about the companies and groups that are resisting it. And so far, we have not had compared to other bills, the resistance has been a little bit quiet. However, there's been a lot of concern about the port and impacts, anything that might hurt the port, especially with the bridge collapse that occurred. We don't want to exacerbate any of the economic impacts there. And that is why we thought it was so important to do the independent study, so that we actually have good data that indicates that there's no reason this should hurt the port. So I think the opposition, it has not come out in great numbers or with great fanfare. Not to say it isn't coming, but we have not seen that yet. And the feedback, as I said, from legislators has really been primarily around impacts to the port. So that's good news at this point in time. And Kristen, do you want to run through how and when to submit testimony? A couple questions on that.
Sure. So there again, you can submit written testimony. Actually, you can sign up to submit testimony, either written or verbal testimony, through the Maryland General Assembly website, and you need to submit it 2 days in advance of the bill hearing. So for the 27th is looking quickly at the calendar. The 27th, I believe, is a Thursday, which would mean you need to submit it by Tuesday between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. on 2 days before the hearing. So that would be, yes, on the Tuesday, the 25th. Just checking to make sure that that the 27th was in fact a Thursday. And then the same thing for the House. The House hearing is on Thursday, March 6th. So you need to submit it to the House on Tuesday, March 4th. And it's easy to do. The most important thing, again, you don't have to be an expert in coal transport. If you are, that's great. But if you're not, that is not necessarily what your most important thing that you can say is something they can't hear from anybody else, which is why this is important to you. And one of the things that we've been seeing in the chat is there's a lot of interest in the technology and the way that the companies are actually not necessarily, the way that companies are making decisions, not based on how it's impacting the communities. And so that kind of response to the legislature, letting your delegates and senators know that this is a thing that is important to you, is really important for them to hear. Because again, they want to hear from you. They don't necessarily want to hear from me. My ability to do my job is a lot easier when they've already been hearing from their constituents. So I would say that's it. And again, I will make sure that my contact information is in the chat, so you can reach out to me directly if you have any other conversations. The bill is House Bill 1088 and Senate Bill 882. And anything else for that we wanted to talk about, Kim?
One of the other questions that we had that we just want to touch on is that, coal is used to burn and create energy, and will this impact our energy rates? And I want to make it perfectly clear it will not. This is coal that is being transported through the state and exported. So it doesn't have any bearing on Maryland's energy production and Maryland's energy rates, nothing. So no impact there. So just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I didn't see that come through the chat, so I'm glad you did. One of the other big issues in the General Assembly this session, if you've been paying attention, one of the big questions is the concerns about the state budget and potential budget cuts. Another one is about energy and energy costs. So again, this is something that we think will help the situation, help health, help our climate, and help Marylanders everywhere. But it looks like we're just about out of time. Kim, any parting words before we close out?
No, just lot of great gratitude for everything and for engaging in this. It's a good, important bill, and we, as Kristen said, your legislators need to hear from you. So keep it up. We will see you next week.
Yes, and thanks, Kim, for all of your work on this, for the leadership that you've shown on helping to craft this bill from the very beginning. And thanks to everybody for such a robust conversation in the chat. It's been illuminating for us. It's been, and it's great to see so much engagement on this issue. If we missed any of your questions, I apologize. Please send it to us and we'll try to get back to you about it. But thank you so much for joining and for your support in the work. If you have any questions that weren't answered today, please send it to us by email and we'll get back to you. And look forward to our next Friday Digest that we hope will, I think, we'll be talking about a bill coming in for the General Assembly that opens the door for new gas power plants and why we need to be sure that that door stays closed. So that should be an exciting conversation. Please be sure to fill out our short 5-question survey, which should be in the chat now. And again, thank you so much for joining us for this Friday Digest. Take care.
Happy Valentine's Day.
And happy Valentine's Day.